icebreaker question to test the audio.
Okay.
What do you think about sweet potatoes?
I love sweet potatoes. Especially those like sweet potato like fries.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the shit. I like those.
So, I know, but who are you?
Who am I? My name is Anastasiya. Surname is a weird one, Paraskevova. So I'm like pretty much was born in Kharkiv, Ukraine, and grew up here and stayed here through the majority of the war, but went places as well, like in Poltava and Kiev every now and then. But yeah, I mostly stayed in Kharkiv, and I work as a volunteer now. Most of my time, which is what I do is I get money for and buy a bunch of stuff like scopes, drones, protective vests, things like that, medical aid for our soldiers, and deliver it to the front lines. Sometimes I go myself, most of the time others deliver it and I just, get it. I also have been sort of like a spokesperson for Ukraine for a while. I landed somehow on CNN.
Anastasiya, we first met you right after you had fled the city of Kharkiv. You've now been back for the first time.
And then afterwards started to talk with like YouTubers, like journalists, being part-time fixer as well. So, get in journalist places like in Kharkiv mostly, and in Oblast, which is like a region, Kharkiv's region. So yeah, so that's basically, I guess, that's it. We're now in my father's house. My father was killed by Russian artillery and in July, and his house was also pretty much like destroyed and fire and stuff. So yeah, so we're here now and doing this interview, I guess, in his house, which is pretty weird. Yeah.
A little surreal one.
A little bit, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My father's home used to be, at least, entire thing was like mostly ruined because there had been like trees, flowers everywhere, the fence no longer there, everything has been kind of like ripped apart and burned by the artillery shell, which was Russian Smerch. Happened in July 11th in Monday morning, so like 10 o'clock in the morning, something like that. My father and my mother was getting ready for work and they were having breakfast, and yeah, so this is where the landed. And this was where my father was standing. Of a splash there, which was my father. He was shredded with shrapnel and also squashed against the wall. So I'm not sure which one kind of killed him, but ambulance told us it was like instant, so that's good. And yeah, also like everything was kind of like shredded. Let me show you some stuff. This was like roses and like grapes and stuff like that here, all burned up. And where the car was, you can see like basically stuff of it was also shredded. The car was entirely ruined. We tried to fix it to give it to the army because really we don't need it that much. And wanted to, give something our way. Yeah. So this is, you can even see holes here still.
Can, yeah.
Yeah. Kinda like that. So this is what mostly kills people, like the shrapnel, the bits, stuff like that. Most of it was like that. So it works like smerch is basically like a tornado kinda word. So it works like that. It just lands, there's like explosion, and then there's like this kind of like this motion of shrapnel that just goes everywhere. It's supposed to be used against tanks, not people generally and their houses, but Russia. So we can probably go inside, try to at least. There also was a cat here he loved. She was okay actually. Survived. A bit shocked, but we managed to get her a new owner and she is okay now. In Poltava actually. So yeah, so this is basically kind of dark, but you know, should have took my damn, it's bad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's
You're
just
good.
so bad.
It's
Yeah. So yeah, so not only was it destroyed by artillery, it was also ruined by fire afterwards. What happened is our neighbor, who is dead already, but you know, she was a demented elderly lady and she kind of caused the fire, basically. And not only that, but also that day there was an outage, like a blackout. So firemen could not just get the call. So they arrived like very late, and most of the thing kind of burned down. But I do think we can go upstairs. So. You there?
Yep, I'm good.
I can, help you out a bit. That's an interesting arrangement.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how on earth are we going to renovate that? I don't know, but we will try. Yeah, so this was the living room, and this is actually where my mother survived. So she was here, right here, when this happened. So my father was on the balcony, and she was asking him to come inside, stop standing there, you old fool, stuff like that, And she went outside to him actually, and she was standing there for maybe 30-50 seconds trying to ask him to get inside, but then she kind of and went home. And this was exactly when the artillery landed, so pretty much saved her. That I might have had lost both parents actually. It was 30 seconds ordeal, So she kind of went here, and she was about to cross to the kitchen to finish breakfast, and then that's when it happened. So she was saved by this couple walls that were between her and the explosion. Yeah, most of it just the rubble from the roof fell over her, from the ceiling, but she was unharmed mostly. Whoa. This was the kitchen. Yeah, still is, I guess. Yeah, used to chill here quite a lot back in the day, drinking tea and stuff. This actually was my couch, my childhood sofa. My father took it here, Didn't have much money for the new one, so he took this one. This was also all pretty much the windows just flew in, and also a bunch of stuff fall over here, but it wasn't as bad here. Also, I don't know if you can really see it because it's dark, but there's this orange ceiling. My father dyed it orange for some reason, and he was like, "Isn't this cool? Very beautiful." And I was like, yeah, Dad. Basically, I didn't want to upset him back in the day, so he never knew that I actually did not like his orange ceiling. Lie, a big lie. Could probably go to the balcony, probably.
Okay.
Let's try at least. Oh, yeah, that's better. Careful, careful.
Just because you asked, I'm going to be not careful now.
This was a cabinet, actually. A working, area. The computers and stuff like that. This was... Oh, we cannot go on the balcony. Because it's,
It's boarded, yeah.
Yeah, boarded. Well, I kind of wanted to go here, but no way, I guess. Well, not to say that... Well, I guess we should go in the kitchen then. Probably be the best place.
I wanted to move on to your experiences with the war, but before we do that on there, is there anything more you want to share about your father, about who he was and while we were here? have that. I don't know if that's
Yeah, it's he was kind of like a funny dude. He liked his literal dad jokes, and pretty much was okay with people not laughing at them. He laughed plenty for everyone. So he was very good with like his. He could do pretty much everything. So like fix like anything like in the house, and he was very good with like his skills, like masterwork stuff like that. And he was he was pretty kind, I'd say. He had some struggles in his life in terms of like financial problems. He was like in debt as well. A bunch of like stuff with his life did not work out like he wanted, but overall he really loved like this place, this house. It was something he kind of built for himself as well, and he was a gardener as well, so he grew like a bunch of like trees, like pears, apricots, like flowers everywhere, roses, stuff like that. And and I huge thing was apricots, I think. He was like he would, in the yard where there was like a bunch of like apricot trees and stuff like that. So what we would do, we would pick them when they would, grow fruit. So he would like invite us, me and my sister and some of our friends as well, to come around and just have like this kind of family time, just picking up those like fruits and stuff like that. He was like also a huge fan of jams, like mostly apricot ones, but also other fruits as well. So I even got myself like an apricot tattoo. In his memory. I thought like, what should I get? But then I thought like, obviously apricots. Could also got olives because he was Greek and also he loved them olives. Obviously Greeks. But decided to do the apricot after some thinking. So yeah, he was. Overall, I'd say I wish, he lived more, obviously. And, But the good thing is that, obviously, my mom survived, could have been killed as well. And for her, it's way worse, I think, because she was with him for 38 years. 38 years is a pretty long time. Yeah, I have not been alive for that time. So now I think the most important thing is to, to move kind of like forward. Yeah, so also they could not bury him for several reasons. Most of it was there was no burial in Kharkiv because so many people like basically died. So like 30 people died in the oblast at that day, just that, not my father. And so it was pretty hard to do. We tried to actually bring his body to Greece, but because of the paperwork reasons, they wrote a wrong name on the certificate. Whatever, just a long story overall, but we couldn't do it, and his body was in such a bad condition, like ripped quite severely, so it was hard to preserve it. So we ended up deciding to burn like the body and to keep the ashes, basically cremation, right? Yeah. So now that this urn is in my like house at home, in my apartment. Yeah. So this was like a bit of a surreal thing. When they got me those ashes, they decided to. Basically, there was trouble with getting it, I think, by car, so they did it by postal service. And they were like, you will like receive it in the post offices, that's fine. And I was like, well, okay. Kind of strange, but okay. So the surreal thing was that I chose a postal office in Poltava that was in the mall. And I didn't know it. And it was like the most like, I don't know, like surreal, weird ass shit, wacky experience probably ever, because I went to the mall and there was like Kalush playing there, which is a Ukrainian band, and there was like Stefania Mama, the song that won the Eurovision. And it was such a trip. And I was like, went to the postal office, and there was a dude. It was summer, so he was like dressed in like shorts and like this like loose like t-shirt, and he was receiving those like funky umbrellas. I don't know why, but he was like pink, green, blue, and he was like, opening those umbrellas up, and and the postal service worker was like, what do you want? And I was like, well, my father's ashes, please. And everyone was like, So yeah, I did cry a bit on my way back, just because of this, how fucking weird that was to pick up your dad's remains in the mall. Overall such is life, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with me. So, air raid siren went off. So.
Oh. You can't hear him. Can't hear him here.
Right.
Yeah. Which is, by the way, was one of the problems. Yeah. So yeah, probably think he heard them. Not sure. Maybe he would move. No, he was a stubborn as mole. Really, he wouldn't move. He would go this thing that I always hated he was doing that. Like I talked with him quite a bit about it. Like, why the fuck are you going on the balconies every time? Just when shit explodes, don't go on the balcony.
Right.
And he did. So probably, yeah, you can't hear it. Yeah. But back then you couldn't. In July, in my apartment as well, by the way, you couldn't hear it, which is another part of the town as well. But yeah, so he would just go outside like all the time, and I was like, why the fuck are you doing that? And he's not the only one, by the way. It's men. Just what is it with men? My volunteer buddy Fike, he would go on the balcony every time shit explodes. I like wanted to throttle him at one point. Just why? Just put your ass behind, couple walls and stay there. It's just, man.
I know all the videos I see are like guys.
Yes, it's men.
Like videoing and being like, oh fuck. Like,
you wouldn't see like maybe sometime, but mostly you wouldn't see a woman like, oh, explosions. It's just what the, like that's another story.
Yeah.
A bit of a rant.
I do have another section of questions, but I wanted to know if you wanted to talk about how, not how you're doing fundraising, but where people can go for that,
Yeah,
receipts and everything.
Basically my Twitter, which is like Ukrainian Nana, and maybe they didn't post it somewhere.
Not at all, no.
Yeah, but it's just, my Twitter is basically the place. So there's like in my bio, there's my PayPal, and it's my Gmail basically. And you can donate there and support if you want, my shit. I post most of things I buy and places I go on Twitter. And I have a bunch of people now there, yay! So I can, share my adventures. Bad word for this whole thing, but that's about it. Yeah, I would appreciate obviously any support. If anyone can, give it, then do it.
Back before the war on there, you were heavily involved in the Maidan movement, the movement from independence and of moving more towards becoming part of Europe on there, and less away from Russian influence. Can you talk a little bit about why you wanted to?
Well, basically when Maidan Revolution happened, I was 19, and I was a revolutionary. I participated in pretty much like the entire thing. And I was a student at the time, studying sociology, but I pretty much left university and became full-time revolutionary, which does not pay. Yeah, so maybe not the wisest choice now that I think about it, but I don't really regret it that much. Mostly I left it for various reasons, but one of the reasons was that, pretty much quite a lot of my professors and personnel in the university were like straight up vatniks, basically like very pro-Russian, mocked revolutionaries, mocked Maidan protesters in Kyiv, pretty much wished them to die and stuff like that on a regular, which to me was not a vibe, as you people say in the United States. So I decided to, fuck that. I of course supported the idea behind it, which was, I guess, you should live with dignity, I think. That's the main idea. So you should not allow people you supposedly elected, such as our president at the time, Yanukovych, and his party, to basically wipe their feet on the people, because he decided to basically change the course. The course for prior years was to basically move towards European Union, to fulfill things that are requirements to be part of European Union, and most of the people in Ukraine supported that course, so 60-something% at the time. And he decided to rapidly change it and basically stick with Russia, which is something that most people did not want, because Russia means same shit that we were fighting against, which is like corruption, which is like subjugation and all sorts of things. Pretty much entire control of Russia of very almost all institutions, almost all important institutions in Ukraine, in our society as well. So yeah, so we wanted to have like proper democracy, we wanted to have proper human rights, anti-corruption laws, working institutions, which are all things that Russia does not have, and are all things that Western countries seem to be way better at. Let's put it like that. Not perfect, but way better at. So yeah, so what happened is students pretty much my age, like 19, 20 years of age, went to the streets and protested this decision of our government. And the answer of the government was to beat them up to pretty much the pulp. And most people, as myself and others, did not like that, and felt like this was a threat to our future, probably democracy, elections and everything. It was like an attempt to establish a tyranny, and afterwards he kind of proved that, Yanukovych, because he established those dictator laws, as they know in the West, which was no gatherings, not allowed, more than 5 people are not allowed together, pretty much severe like punishments, like 10 years, 15 years in prison for like unsolicited, gatherings and protests, pretty much curbing entirely our rights to protest. And we were way on the way to be Belarus at that point. So basically like a puppet state of Russia with a installed dictator that is never changing. And yeah, so this is not the life we wanted for ourselves, and that's why most people participated in that revolution, because it was something about pretty much the future, and the future we envisioned for ourselves was very different from Belarus for obvious reasons. Yeah, so this is what happened, and I kind of like a bunch of stuff happened afterwards, like annexation of Crimea, invasion in 2014, Donbass invasion, and a lot of things. But still, I don't regret, the decision to participate, despite the fact that it brought quite a lot of struggle. Evidently to Ukraine, which I think is worth it, because I'd rather that than, struggle is awful for sure. I'm like literally sitting in my father's house who was killed. But it was, I wouldn't call it a direct consequence of our choices, it was more like a consequence of freedom in a way, because if you want to fight for it with someone who does not want to give you that, which is Russia, and they will punish you for that, but if you don't do it, then you live a life of like conformism and stagnation, which is something that indeed happened before Maidan, I think, in Ukraine.
And you were right there in the square fighting on there. What was that like, seeing the faces of these people who were A, brought in from Russia, and B, the police fighting against you?
Well, it was pretty rough. Back in the day, I thought this was the worst thing ever. Now I know it's not. Thank you, Russia. But but back in the day, I thought this would be like the most crazy like experience in my life, obviously, right? But this was a pretty hard time. I saw people killed, Maidan protesters stabbed, shot, beaten with like bats and stuff like that. So it was pretty bad. And the struggle was mostly against so-called anti-Maidan, which was like partially our own vatniks, but mostly just people from Belgorod. They would brought people basically in buses, is what happened. We saw it several times. So they would, ship people from Belgorod and pretend that they're Kharkiv pro-Russian people. And they would just magically Russia Today would appear and fill them just on time. But overall it was very obvious, because actually for most people it's not visible, you cannot hear it, but we can. We have the Russians, they speak Russian differently. It's Russian, yeah. In the East we mostly speak Russian, but you can hear the accent is different, and it's pretty clear. Also, you would ask them questions like, what's this street? It's like the biggest street in Kharkiv. Yeah, everyone knows it in Kharkiv. Like, for example, Sumskaya, I don't know, something like that. And they would be like, Marx! Which is points for attempts, because in post-Soviet everything is kind of Marx, Lenin, named after a very creative name in post-Soviet Union. So you have like Lenin, Marx, and heroes of SSSR or some shit like SSR is the USSR. So basically shit like that. So it was a attempt to, but wrong, because most of the things have been actually renamed back to its like historical names or new names. So yeah, so there was like a cool grandpa, actually, he was very old, who participated in Maidan. Cool dude, he was blind, and he was against like pro-Russian imperialist shit back in the day. Even he was part of the newspaper that was pretty much highlighting the oppression of Russia, of Soviet and stuff like that, Soviet Russia as well. So he was on Maidan pretty regularly, and he even saved my ass one time. Actually, I was kind of like stomped by people, so I fell, and they started to run over me every now and then, which not great, not pleasant. But he picked me up. Not only he picked me up, he also swatted with his stick at the at the pro-Russian person. Cool. Yeah, he was pretty cool. I don't know, like maybe he probably was already dead because he was like very old at the time and it's been 8 years. But who knows? But yeah, so cool dude. I then managed to get him out of there as well because he was blind, and I was like, guiding him. So we were like, a team, yeah, a cool team. So he was very like. Obvious to him as well that this was, all made up, all Russian, and he would say, "Russians, go home, vodka. There's no vodka here." Basically, is what we say. Yeah, it's a traditional thing to say to Russians because if there's no vodka, what are you doing here, right? Yeah, so so yeah, this was a thing. They attacked us quite regularly, and also of course like police was against us, and there was like this special forces Berkut who were killing most people in Maidan in Kiev, and quite a lot of them were for Kharkiv, I'm like sad to say. So they then returned and they started to do this here, which was also not good and not great. One of the first times I actually experienced like such hatred towards like a nation or like ethnicity or people, whatever, the one you want to call it, is when I interacted with these guys, because they kind of like surrounded us, circled us, and we were just standing there like, encircled, and they would just scream, like yell, or spit like from their mouths, like "Ukropy, khachli," like that, which is like derogatory words against Ukrainians. And in Ukraine, in Kharkiv, like, and we were like, my sister, I remember, was like, whoa, like they really hate us, really do. And it's the first time I saw it, and the faces were like, the muscles on their faces were very like, I don't know, like very aggressive, very strange. It's like dogs on leashes or some shit like that. They were just waiting for given that order to, to come at us, basically. It was very, and they did eventually, but it was very strange. I never saw things like that. This was the first time I realized what it kind of feels like to be like hated for no other reason than just being like a certain nationality or like ethnicity. Pretty weird. But yeah, this was the experience, and was pretty rough, but not as rough as it was in Kiev, obviously. But still, got our own like, killed people, and also we did quite a lot important job, because we did not allow to create what we call DNR, which is like Kharkiv's People's Republic, something like DNR is like Donbass People's Republic, Luhansk People's Republic. Phony that shit Russia creates, basically. They really did try to do this in Kharkiv, and it was strategically important to him because Kharkiv is basically like the central city in East. So it's like the heart of the East, let's put it like that, the most important city here. So if you have Kharkiv, you have like mostly the entirety of the East, not just Donbass. So yeah, so they tried, they even like did the flags with those shitty, colors, and like Kharkiv's People's Republic like there, painted there. So they were prepared to have it, but the people prevented that from happening. So more than almost 60,000 people were there at that day. And also was the day when Yanukovych escaped Kiev, which was an overall all around like victory of Maidan in all sorts of places, but escaped to Russia, obviously, right? And he was, got a bit tired running to consult Putin every now and then, decided to stay there permanently, right? It just making a jest at the fact that he basically was going to Putin to ask him, like, and phoning him as well, to ask him what should I do with those like protesters, and Putin would be like, yeah, roll them over, what the fuck, man, just do what I do. So yeah, but didn't work because Ukrainians are, are not pussies, so it didn't work out. Run over people, yeah, but didn't stop us. So anyhow, the thing is that what happened there is we saved pretty much Kharkiv from being that shit show which Kharkiv's People Republica would have been. And 60,000 people like marched then, almost across the entire city, and this was a pretty happy moment because there was like flags everywhere. People would finally feel free to do it. Actually, they would like throw flags from the windows and from the cars. People would signal us, and it was pretty sweet. And then we dropped Lenin, which was a big statue, like the biggest statue in Ukraine, and I do think one of the biggest in post-Soviet sphere at all. So we dropped the guy basically. It took like 8 hours, something like that, and with ropes and peeled his legs and stuff like that. And it was a glorious fall, let's say. Let's put it like that. That guy fell, like Soviet Union did. I was there for the entirety of the time. And I remember like when he started like doing this like motion, started to fall, and everyone was like and then he fell, and he was empty inside, like very good metaphor for Soviet Union, like very imposing from the outside but very empty inside. He then fell over and fell to pieces, and people would pick up like ears, shoes, things like that, and just climbing over it and celebrating, and everyone ran like towards it. Then it was pretty glorious thing. Yeah.
Do you think that's the moment when a lot of people really started to feel Ukrainian? Was after that victory?
I think that they felt kind of Ukrainian before, it was just kind of stumped this identity in a way, and people felt either embarrassed to be full Ukrainian, admit themselves as Ukrainian, or they were like didn't care that much, thought it was not important, and who cares basically. But at that moment, I think like when Maidan was happening, they already felt, not the victory, but when it started was I think when everyone thought they were like, oh wow, we're a nation actually, because it's just there was such a unity, such a, I don't know even how to say it, but it was just something about fighting for a cause with like a lot of people just brings you this sense of purpose, I guess. And and people actually kind of started celebrating blue, yellow colors. They started celebrating like vyshyvanka, which is like ethnic Ukrainian type of dress. So all of that started, people started talking more in Ukrainian, people started singing, people would, read poetry on Maidan and do things like that, which is something that we did before, just it was not as, it was not celebrated as something good, but now it was. So I guess you could say the start of it was when everyone felt like a nation, and the end of it was like just, the continuation, I guess, of the process. Yeah, something like that. Or maybe like a little bit of a story actually told it to you, I think. But when the Lenin fall, basically the couple next days, there was like a bunch of like Russian media, Russia Today, shit like that, filming like, oh, what those Banderites did, the usual. And there was like, they would try to catch like elderly people mostly, because elderly people would be typically the ones who would be like upset about Lenin doing a little tumble. So they kind of landed on the wrong person, which was my father, and she asked him, the lady, she asked him, how do you feel like about him not being on the Freedom Square anymore, like, and my father was like, well, having Lenin on Freedom Square is like placing a portrait of your rapist inside your house. So they did not include that bit. It was never found on Russian TV. So yeah, but I felt like it was a based father moment, I'd say. Yeah. Also, he was like very shocked when we told him. We after this, he took a tumble. We were like, oh, like my sister, my friends, like everyone, oh, we dropped this guy. Lenin is no more. He like fell over, broke into like pieces. There's only a shoe left. There was like a monument to the shoe for some time, actually. Yeah, and he was like, no way you did that. It was such a, it was like a kind of like such a prominent thing in his life. Like his entire life, he was a student in Kharkiv and Karazina University, and physics actually was what he was, had education in. So his entire life, from the youth, he would pass across this giant Lenin statue, like every day mostly. And so he was, when he like actually believed we pulled it, he was very moved, I guess, that his daughters like participated in this kind of event, because he was maybe proud of it, I don't know. Possibly, yeah. yeah, so that's it, I guess.
Sounds like he was proud of you.
Maybe, yeah. I'm not sure, but maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So let us go on to the city of Kharkiv itself on here. We went around a lot of city center yesterday, and you were saying that it's really important to protect these beautiful places that are here because so much had been destroyed either in Soviet times or World War II or any time prior.
Yeah, so this is something. Seeing like architecture in the city center broken was especially unpleasant because when shit explodes in your city, it's unpleasant in general. But this is just, like I said, that so many things have been ruined in World War II by Nazi occupation. So many things was ruined by war itself. Obviously, World War I was actually also fought on Ukrainian land. Just why pass us by, right? So this is just something that tends to happen. And Soviets, they ruined like pretty much everything beautiful in Eastern Ukraine. So in the West you would have like the most of the architecture intact, but here it was like all ruined, all like torn apart, turned into like tuberculosis hospitals, like some ugly ass storage buildings, things like that. So I told you Soviets have like three colors, which is like diarrhea brown, a red, like blood diarrhea red, and green vomit. Those like three main colors they tend to use on everything. So we have like this beautiful like palace in Kharkivsk Oblast. I was there, Sharivka it's called, and it was so like a very stunning like castle palace type of thing. So what they did, Soviets, they ruined the entire interior. They just ripped it apart, like paintings, everything expensive was like sold. Like they would remove bells from churches, for example, right? So they would do that, and then they did this blood diarrhea, floor and blood diarrhea walls, and turned it into hospital for, I think, like tuberculosis, like I said, something like that. And that's something that they tend to do. They tend to just, so the little we do have left of the beautiful things, when they get ruined, is very painful. Also, the city was like improving quite a bit because with Kharkiv was one of the clearest actually cities, like in terms of like no dirt, pretty clean, very like well kept. So like flowers, arrangements, stuff like that. So to see those like when I was a child, this was not a thing, and then I grew up and it started to look more like more beautiful, more kept, more well put together. And to see it like now ruined again is a bit hard, I guess, because you get like this like little, I don't know, like one little thing gets better looking and you're like, oh yay, because nobody wants to live in the ugly, and but now they, that's why we call them orcs basically at this point. I think not the only reason, but Russians tend to be like orcs. They tend to just come and ruin everything that is beautiful, whether it is architecture, whether it is the clean look of everything, or the life itself, just ruin everything that is, I guess you could say, people tend to hold precious. So just senselessly, just because they can, So that's, I guess, it.
Do you think that Kharkiv will be able to return to that at some point, that same feeling before the war?
I do think so, yeah. It would not be the same, obviously, because, shit got blown. Most people have at least someone they like lost or was maimed. So maybe like relative, friend, co-worker, some kind of like thing like that. Most people at this point have someone who have been hurt or killed. So it's not the same. Quite a lot of people lost their houses as well, of course, especially in like areas which we're going to go to. Saltivka, which is Pivnichna Saltivka is something like the huge residential area basically. It's like 6,000, like 500,000 people live there. Most of the residents of Kharkiv live there actually. And of course it's not the same. It probably cannot be renovated. I was told most of it will be, removed and rebuilt again, which will take obviously quite a bit of time to do. But I do think we can. It's already way better than it was. So we were like walking around, and you said, oh, like people are like hanging out and chilling, and this is something you would not see like even 3 months ago. So people are returning, life is returning. Yeah, sure, some things are boarded, plenty of restaurants like clubs and stuff like that do not work still. But overall, the feeling is better, and I think it will get better. And when we win, we can actually, start, I think, rebuilding things. I hope fast enough.
Tell me a little bit about why you really love Kharkiv, why you believe in it so much.
Most people will say in Kharkiv there's like the syndrome of the best city in Ukraine, people will be like, Kharkiv is the best, things like that. I'm not sure like if that's true. There are plenty of great cities in Ukraine, but most of all it's just, it's just home. Most of all it's this, I guess. Also the people, obviously, right? Most people, when you ask them, I ask like several soldiers and just people, volunteers in Kharkiv, what do you like about the Kharkiv the most? Most of them would say the people and parks. Yeah, so the people are like kind of different, I guess, in a way than many other places. Each city, each area has its own unique charm, obviously, right? But I think ours is that people are very kind of like laid back, but they also like very I don't even know, like they swear a lot and they're fun. They they feel like a community in the best way, I guess.
You talked at one point very earlier about you were here for most of the time during this war.
Yeah.
There was a point where you did have to leave, though.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a little bit about that, what that was about, and how that felt?
Well, basically, I felt like staying and helping with Kharkiv, in the worst time, which was when there was no food and shelling, artillery shelling every day. So I did what I could, like in terms of like volunteer work then. But at some point, my mother was just basically unable to take it anymore. So she was like pretty terrifying, the artillery. And there was like this one day when we had like a Russian warplane fly over our head like 6-7 times. So this guy was trying to bomb the TV station, and the TV station is quite close. So it's like in the forest. I don't know, like maybe 15 minutes away, something like that. So he would fly like straight. Basically very close to the roof of our house every time, and the sound of it is just probably the worst. Like the plane's just the worst. Yeah, so I'm still like kind of spooked by that. When I was in Poltava, actually afterwards, they would be our Ukrainian planes, and I would still like drop from my bed and just drop on the floor every time. Yeah, my mother as well. She would like be walking around like in a forest, basically just chilling, and then it would be a plane there and she would drop on the floor like immediately. So it's not fun, and my mom was taking it worse than me and my sister were, and we decided to go to Poltava for a while just to chill a bit, but afterwards she then returned because she wanted to start working again, and it seemed like the situation was better in May, but then it started to get worse in July. In June, July it was like constant shelling, like in March almost. So she also wanted to see my father, who did not want to leave. He decided not to leave the house where we're in now. So he was like, fuck that, I'm not leaving. And she wanted to be back with him, and she stayed here with him until, he was killed and the house ruined. After that, we took her back to Poltava for a while, and then she and I lived in Kyiv for a bit because she just did not want to be in Kharkiv, basically.
Continuing on then to talk about your experiences in the war, you came back here to do a lot of volunteer work,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems to me that, and maybe this is my ignorance on it, that you came back and you've been doing volunteer work in a way that very few out here have.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to blow how do you call it, blow your whistle, whatever the fuck the phrase is, how it is to
Blow smoke up here.
I mean, to praise yourself too much is not a good idea, I think. But people told me that I did quite a bit of volunteer aid, more than most people. But a lot of people in Kharkiv do volunteer work. So either they just cook for soldiers 5 days a week, or they just provide aid, like Igor does, my volunteer buddy, my second father at this point. So he would bring it to the like the most dangerous areas, like Bakhmut or like Kupiansk or like Ruskov-Zavaya, something like that, or the actual front line. So they're doing way more than me, in my opinion, because they actually do risk their lives quite a lot. Plenty of people do amazing fundraisers, like buy cars, drones, stuff like that. We bought 3 cars at this point. So for volunteers and for soldiers as well. Also, yeah, drones are pretty expensive to buy. We also bought a quad bike, and we bought a bunch of like medical aids, power stations, things like that, because of the outages and electricity problems. Power banks, quite a bit. Clothing, thermal wear, stuff like that for the winter was very cool because we bought like quite expensive, like British UK made thermal stuff, so it would not get like soaked, and nobody wants wet feet and shit like that. So boots and stuff like that for the soldiers. And yeah, generator, which was one very expensive one. This was probably my most expensive buy. It was $12,000, I think. Yeah. So, whoa. It's a lot for everyone, but for Ukrainians, I want people to understand that this is a millionaire type of shit, But many people, like I said, do it as well. There was also like fundraisers, like volunteer organizations, but I am like a single entity, so in that regard, I did manage to raise quite a bit, mostly thanks to YouTuber streamer Destiny and his fans, so his community, I should say, probably not the fan, DDG they call it. So so thanks to them, most of it is them. Other people as well, but most of the money that was raised by them.
Obviously, you received quite a lot of harassment.
Yeah, it happens.
From what you do, from wannabe Vatniks in the West on there.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother you either, I assume.
Nah.
No. Yeah.
Who cares? Internet. It's just hard to be pressed about like you are like people Nazi whore or something like Banderite, Nazi something whore, Nazi something the Banderite. That was obviously right. And it's just like a like a typical like sexism packed with like Nazi shit. Which if I be offended by that, it'd be weird, because it's just, first of all, who the fuck cares about these people? Second of all, block them. Just block exists. Just block them. And sometimes it feels kind of like a bit weird, but overall, it's not that big a deal. It's hard to be pressed about internet hate when you have like artillery shots, and you have like your house destroyed and your father killed and your friends blown to pieces. It's just your priorities changed, I guess. Hard to care about some weird ass dude who called you like a mean name on the internet when this is going on, I think it's kind of like no offense to anyone, but kind of like a privilege to even be bothered by that thing. So your life is kind of okay, I think, kind of good if your day is ruined by a mean comment on the internet. But overall, sometimes it can be a bit unpleasant, like this Yankee Tanky, whatever the fuck that person is. He basically like mocked my father's death, like basically enjoyed that I was, he was killed, and also pretty much wished me to die, which got him blocked on Twitter. And people like that, people like him. It's not pleasant, but not the end of the world. Like dick pics, obviously. My email is there on my Twitter, so you get like little buttons every now and then. So it's just how it is, I guess. Internet is like that. I got way more like positivity than I got negativity. So yeah, and the Vatniks, they just they pretty much act exactly like the Russian thing do. So they would like harass people and just write a bunch of like bullshit propaganda shit there. So just do the same thing with them. You just block them and move on.
Do you think that you've been able to do a lot of this stuff because of your quasi-internet stardom on there? Your kind of
stardom.
What kind of fame you have from this group of YouTubers, being able to be on
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly because, I guess 2 main reasons is, one, I speak English, So people talk with me, foreigners do, and stuff like that. And CNN was also mostly because of that. But also after I kind of like landed on CNN and stuff like that, worked with journalists, had some video diaries made for ITV News and people like that. And Dylan Burns, who is also a YouTuber, and he was also like a journalist here. Second time he's here in Ukraine and filming stuff. So he was basically the reason, I would say, because I chilled with him and I showed him stuff. We filmed a bunch of things, and then I would talk with him about he would ask me basically questions about YouTubers, stuff like that. So what do I know about this whole political sphere? And I was like, oh, not much. I didn't even know that there are such a thing as random duders talking about politics, in YouTube. But then, and I stumbled across none other than Hassan Piker, which is relatively a little bit, famous person. Yeah, so tiny streamer. So he then spewed a bunch of absolute garbage about Ukraine, and I was mad about that, and I basically just told Dylan about it, and it kind of became viral is a strong word, but many people watched that video of me shitting on Hassan because Hassan is famous, obviously, right? And Destiny happened to, being the biggest fan of Hassan in the world, he decided to watch that video with me, I guess, and so this is how I came in contact with him. So kind of through Dylan, but also because of Hassan. Thank you, Hassan, I guess. You're not a fan of us banderites, I know, but you helped us. Thank you.
No.
I'm joking. I understand. But I've never been called that actually. Just something I invented to, for the peeps, for the Americans.
Do people really have a hard time saying Anastasiya?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Quite a hard time.
I imagine it's just if they read your name too, and then they're like,
Yeah. Well, the surname is obviously a rough one. Let's put it like that. It's a Russified Greek surname.
Right.
So it's weird in its own. You would fill a bunch of surnames like that. So, for example, my buddy Fike, he's not Jafarov. It's a different surname. So Ov is just a Russian Russification. So that's why people will say you have so many Russian surnames. It's a Russified surname. It's not Russian. So my actual is Paraskevaidou is the name. Paraskevaidis if a man, but if a man this, if a woman do. But they Paraskevi Ova ended with Ova, which is a Russian way too. Ov or Ova is the Russian surname endings. So we have a bunch of people like Azerbaijani people, Georgian people, things like that. For example, say some artists, which is actual cultural appropriation, by the way, not by people with dreads, right. but actually, for example, Ayvazovsky, you might have heard of the guy. He's famous painter. He was actually Ayvazyan. So he was Armenian, but they turned him into a Russian-sounding kind of name because only Russian can have great culture, great everything. The rest is just plebs. Don't do anything. Yeah. So they would generally do it, try to rename, and sometimes people would do it themselves. They would change their own surnames just to have a better lives, not to experience so much oppression, shit like that. So, yeah.
Believe it or not, that actually happened a lot in the US too, in a lot of the early days.
Yeah, understandably, right. I think it's a trend in an imperialist thing. It's just, it's not unique to Russia, it's just colonial type of shit.
You had mentioned the highest dollar amount on there, you get that generated on there. What's the fundraiser that you've done that's meant the most to the troops that have been there?
Everything is quite meaningful, power banks, they do help quite a bit, and clothing, of course. Some more exciting things are quad bikes, drones, stuff like that. I actually got a gratitude list for the drones and scopes from the scouting commander, pretty based. But I think the most exciting thing is those very, very ill-equipped battalions. Some are better equipped, some are worse, but the ones who have almost nothing, they had this artillery battalion that had they were like fucking bombs, okay? So there was like very, they had like frost bites and things like that. So for them, probably the most exciting things was thermal wear that we brought to them. So it's not as epic as, you know, drones, but for them it was quite a bit. And I think cookies actually is the most exciting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sweets. They would ask for sweets. They would some sweets, maybe. You know, yeah, just want something nice. Yeah, so I think that's probably the most important things. Yeah.
You have a lot of friends, you know, who have enlisted on there, and you've probably now volunteering made quite a few more friends out there. Is there any that you want to specifically mention or shout out, or?
Well, so much to say. I don't know if we have even like the time for it, but probably like my best buddy would be the best person to like mention, I guess. So he kind of like was the one who gave me a bit of a, I guess you could say, hope in the beginning of this war, because when I was panicking, as most people do when your city is invaded by, you know, invaders and foreign force. So I was like, what the hell is going to happen? Are we gonna get occupied? Like, what's the plan? What do we do? And it was, I think, like 25th of February, so like next day. And yeah, and I phoned like my best buddy, who's from Donbass actually. So he escaped one time from Russians already. His hometown was occupied since 2014. Basically, and so I phoned him, and I was like, what do we do, and he was like, what the fuck else do? We fight, obviously. I'm like 2 steps away from enlisting. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I will stay then and do the volunteer things. And he was like, well, yeah, we're like not escaping, we're not. He said quite clearly that I like ran one time, didn't work, not running this time around. So my new home now is Kharkiv, and fuckers want to take it as well. It's a no from me. So I want to go defend it, and I want to. They will not get, like he said, like this shitty bar, this shitty store, like this I don't know, like a fence, this like yard. You, like my friends, anyone, they will not be getting like any of that. So he enlisted in territorial defense at first, but then actually the regular army as well now. He was actually one of the people who participated in liberation of Izum, who we will go to tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot where I'm going. So in a bunch of other cities as well. He even landed, I think, on one picture that was like guys liberated. I think Izum, maybe, or maybe Kupiansk. Not sure. Like, but they were like with the flag, and they got, I think, on some pretty famous journal actually. And I was like, oh my god, that's my best friend. Yeah, he's in mask, but I recognize, you know, he's like, so he said like, he then showed me lines of people, like kilometers, like literally of people who went to enlist. And I was like, phew, so people have like the will to defend, you know, Ukraine, you know, and I felt like at ease at that point, because I knew that no way they would, you know, get it. Because there are people who want to protect it. Because the only reason you can lose at this point is just because if there is no will of the people to fight back. Because I did not expect that much support from the West at that time. So I was like, well, we still, you know, do need to do something, and we need to defend ourselves, but only if people want to, because who am I to make people go to the fucking front lines, you know? So it's not something I can tell. If I'm not there like as a soldier, then how I can expect other people to do it? But they wanted to. They went there. There was almost entirely volunteer effort in territorial defense, and they managed to pretty much defend all the major cities except for Kherson, and Mariupol was, you know, flattened. But that's like another story. Yeah, so overall it was him. I talked with him like every now and then. Sometimes he would not respond for months, and I would be like, holy fuck, is he dead or not? It's just this, you know. And he was injured actually one time pretty badly. He was injured 3 times by now, but this one was pretty bad. So he managed to get himself like in the hospital, and I could not get a hold of him for a while. And then he was like, oh, I'm okay, just like in a couple like weeks I'll be back to, you know, killing horses. It's so good. So things like that, you know. People lost some people as well at this point already. So my sister's co-worker's ex-husband was killed recently, and yeah, so he had a daughter, like 11, I think, or 12. She's 12, already 12, yeah. So yeah, so things like that, and he basically defended his comrade from a tank attack and got, killed himself. Yeah, so there's things like that. We lost like a bunch of people. By the way, the people who I wanted to give the car to, of my father's car, we renovated the car for them to use, and they never got to use it because all of them were killed. There were like 5 of them, 4 of them were killed, 1 was in the hospital for a while, but he survived. So those were like childhood friends of my friend. Yeah, brothers, he used to call them all the time. So yeah, so this stuff like that, it's just all of those people, of course, do matter and, deserve some stories about them, but couldn't talk about everyone, My best buddy, thankfully, is still fine. Although, almost cannot use his left hand at this point. He also was blind by one eye, because his father, who was pro-Russian dude in Donbass, who was a drunkard, obviously, right? And he beaten him up pretty severely. One time he hit his head of the through the wall basically, and he lost his eyesight in one eye. But yeah, so he would be like a fucking cripple when he returns, that's for sure. So, which is not good. Yeah, not good at all. But yeah, as long as he returns, that's something, Yeah. Some soldiers, I think I saw quite a lot of soldiers say when they get like severely injured to the point that they can no longer participate in pretty much in the fight. They would say like "Moya vina zakinchilась," which is basically like "my war is ended." So this is something they oftentimes say, be very upset about it, because for them it's for all of us it's it's something very important to, it's a word of survival, for preservation of us as people. So yeah.
Obviously, West has all kind of rallied around, for the most part, for Ukraine on there.
Yep.
And you were saying that wasn't expected at all. Really?
No.
Did you think that? How did you think initially that this war was going to go?
Well, I basically thought that they might take several cities closer to the front lines, like Kharkiv, for example, and I thought that it will be like a partisan effort to, push them out. I thought it will be mostly us against them, and I thought that the Western countries will just ignore it, as they did, no offense, for in 2014, and Moldova, Georgia, before other countries as well that they annexed and did the same shit there. So protect Russian people, the shit. So the drill, protecting Russian people everywhere, such things. So that's just something I kind of expected, basically. So for us to fight against them, primarily on our own, maybe some sanctions, maybe like a slap on our wrist type of deal, but I did not expect the level of support, and neither did them. So yeah, so this is something that both things they did not expect, which is why they failed so miserably, is the level of resistance of Ukrainian people and the ferocity of it, and of course the support from the West, which was way more than anyone expected, especially in terms of weapons and anti-air systems, stuff like that. Yeah, so for sure. And I think that's the sentiment like most people would have, I guess.
Absolutely. And of course there is that narrative from the propagandists that it's, there's Maidan was a coup and everything is just, it's all planned, and Ukraine's going to be the 51st state or some weird bullshit.
I wish. So. No, I'm joking. I don't want to be a state, but it's just that's something. It's just very interesting because this has no basis in reality. It's just straight up Russian propaganda. Maidan was a revolution done by the people. I still did not receive any payments from anyone. No cookies from Obama, no cookies from Newland. Still waiting on those. And nothing. Just pure sheer will to live a better life. And how we see it, it's not up to those people, They sometimes say, Ukraine will be worse under the United States. Even if we are, which is bollocks, but we cannot be worse than under Russia, but that's, maybe North Korea or some shit. But it's not gonna be worse, but it's not for you to decide. It's for us. We are people with our own will, with our own brains. We have a very clear vision of how we want to live our lives, and this is not up to anyone but us to decide that. So yeah, I'd say that this is this is a prominent narrative. I heard all of this for 8-9 years from Russia TV, like non-stop, and my Russian relatives, you know. So it's not that surprising, but it's just surprising to hear it in English is the only thing. So you would like, wow, like it's typical Russian talking points like in English. It sounds to me weird, I would say. But other than that, yes, it's just mostly it's the anti-American people who see like America as the biggest evil on planet Earth and willing to close their eyes. I don't see anything bad that Russia does, like or China or like any other country like that. So if the country like kind of settles themselves as like a opposing force to America, they will be like, yeah, fuck yeah, these guys are awesome. Even if it's fucking North Korea, they will still be like, yeah, better than United States. Am I right? You know, capitalism, yeah. So this would be like very left-leaning communists and people like that, but also far-right, like fascist types, or like just some like just all libertarians. Libertarians. This is another thing. I don't know, like fascists, communists, awful right, but libertarians. I don't know, just something about them that pisses me off like more than those two. But this is just, yeah, so some people would, of course, like motivated by either America bad, which would be mostly the leftoids, let's say. But the righties would be like, oh, basically like the most stupid reason ever, which is Biden supports Ukraine, so we don't like Biden, we don't like Ukraine. That's about it. That's about the thought, the depth of the thought. But there's also like this, oh, Democrats support Ukraine. Ooh, Ukraine. Yeah, support Russia. Also some sentiments, of course, towards Russia. So, for example, very far right, like fascist types, they would be like, the glorious leader, Vladimir Putin, you know. So this is be like that. So for them it'd be like, oh, he's such a fascist, I want that. You know, that's understandable. This is something kind of you could expect. So traditional values, like anti-LGBT stuff like that. It just all seems like so juicy to them, so they support it, obviously, right? But this is kind of expected. This is something I kind of like knew that would happen. From the left side, I did not expect them to be so cringe. So yeah, props for that. Surprised me.
Yeah.
But for the righties, I expected them to support, like quite a lot of them support Putin, obviously, because he's their guy. You know, why not? So
he's one of the more successful fascists.
Yeah, of course. So, but this like communist shit is kind of cringe. But again, we knew all along here. It's not a surprise that communists are pretty much the same. So they're just most of them, not all of them, but quite a lot of them. Like people are actually like pretty much hiding behind like Marx socialist shit, and they just are same fascist, just another color.
After the war, after victory on there, obviously no idea what's going to happen, how things are going to go, where the tide of war is going to be at all. What's the first thing you do after victory?
I don't know that much, honestly. I tend to not think about like future that much because a lot is happening in the now, and also you don't really know. So now I'm a little bit more confident about, you know, the future and shit. But in the beginning it was like, we will be occupied, we will get like nuked, what will happen? I only knew I will not leave Ukraine, which I didn't. This whole time was here. But overall I thought like, what's point of thinking about the future that much if you can be like killed? Like, you know, very, as we found out with my father, very randomly, very, there's a low chance, obviously, right? Like a low percentage of you getting amongst all those people, all those houses, why will be your house? But it was. So this 1% of chance is actually a real percentage. It's just low, but it still can happen. So probability works like that, I guess. And so I tend not to think that much about like future. What will I do in the future? I know like some things. I would like to rebuild this house of my father's if I could. It's a pretty sad condition, but maybe it will work, and I would like to, you know, make it like beautiful and rebuild it, plant a garden again, like with flowers and apricots and stuff like that. Also, I would like to bury his ashes like under apricot in the yard if I can. So so things like that I do think about, obviously, but other than that, I don't have like any that much of a plan, I guess. Yeah, the only thing I do really care about is winning. You know, winning, and yeah, after that, we'll figure something out. Just chilling would be nice.
Right. Having tea without having to
yeah, with Romanian friends, you know. So yeah, that's something I think about, yeah, too. You know, how many people would be there by the end, and many people would not return probably who left, my friends, and yeah, but most of all I think about people who would be like, you know, gone basically is what I mean. Yeah, I wish most of people, you know, who died obviously lived and also saw us, you know, being victorious. Like with my father, for example, he would like call me all the time, like, and ask, where are the counteroffensives, you know, when? So he would really like waiting on that, waiting on, you know, Kharkiv's oblast to be liberated. It was like in a couple months after he died. So yeah, things like that basically sometimes. I think about maybe it would be a bit more harder for so many people, maybe me as well, I don't know, like maybe it will like, you know, rush this whole like adrenaline will wears down, and then we will be like, I don't know, depressed or something. Maybe because of everything that happened, it will kind of come to us what actually happened in a big way, you know. But Ukrainians usually deal with those things like with booze, so I think that's what we're gonna do.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
will you ever stop fighting?
Well, no, I think if there would be time that you don't have to fight, then yeah, I would chill likely. Yeah, I sometimes I feel like so tired at times that I would think I would chill for the rest of my days, you know, just do nothing. But you have to, you know, just something you need to do, and you do it, and that's about it. So no time to moping about. Usually people say like, oh, you will like cry and mope when this whole thing ends, you know, just stay on the, you know, on the guard and be do things that need to be done, and then you can like fall apart when nobody needs you anymore. But now people need me, my family needs me, volunteer work needs me, a bunch of people depend on, you know, what I can get for them. So yeah, so that's pretty much. I think stop fighting is something I would want for Ukraine, you know, just for change, like maybe a couple, I don't know, like 100 years without massive wars would be cute, right?
Yeah.
So be very pleased with that. So I would like no major World War wars on our territory, please. That would be also cool. Yeah, so deal with your shit like in some other place, you know, big countries of the world. But you know, it's just something that, of course, I want my country to be like secure. I want to go out, like, you know, to go outside and just don't think about like war and missiles and explosions and shit like that. But doesn't seem to be like in a close future. So you deal with what you have, I guess.
Of course.
Yeah.
Even in wartime, there's been a different amount of social changes and things that have gone through. Obviously, there have been bills proposed and even some passed that are heavily pro-LGBT.
Yeah, that's
do
cool.
you see that trend kind of continuing on there? That
Yeah, for sure. It was happening kind of like since Maidan, with a very like snail pace, but you know, still. Most of it was because of the Euro integration, which if you want to be part of the European Union, gotta be decent human being and, you know, treat others kind of like with tolerance, I guess, is the good thing about it. But other than that, I used to be like, actually was on a Pride thing. Recent one before the war, this phase of war, and was the first one that did not get beat up. Progress,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, so it's kind of good, but also I think the strongest force, I told Dylan about it actually, the strongest force against homophobia now in Ukraine is Russia actually, because people don't want to associate with anything Russian, with anything like has to do with Russia, and homophobia is so prominent in Russian propaganda. It's like very integrated into their like messaging, into their everything pretty much. So the Western degeneracy, you know, this dance, yeah. So for them, it's like a red, I don't know, like a red rag, like for the bowl for them basically. So they use it all the time. So people know it here, obviously, you know. And I had like several conversations with people like with relatively like very like how to say it, like alpha, I don't know, like man duders, yeah, and that would be my friends, right? So, and they are pretty homophobic on a good day, you know. So I would be like, they would do some like very homophobic comments and stuff like that, and I would be like, you know what, you kind of sound like Russians. And they're like, oh, what, me? You know? And I was like, yeah, you do. You're kind of like, you know, obsessed with this whole thing, and you talk like about the bum fucking all the time, like Russians do, and like, just why do you care so much? I don't say that love them or like care for them or something like that, but just why bother? Like why is it so important in your life? And they were like, oh, well. And they kind of thought about, you know, like, why is it so fucking important to me, for real, right? Partially it is because of, like, it was so intense in post-Soviet, like, sphere, and especially Russia. And they're like, oh, I don't want to be, like, associated with anything Russian. And many people actually kind of, like, consider that, which is a good step for sure. And also there's a lot of youth and younger people who are just in general more tolerant. They consume quite a bit of, like, Western pop culture things, movies, music, stuff like that, artists, right? So they are in general much more tolerant, I guess, of otherness, of being like different and stuff like that. So that's, I think, is a good road. Obviously, I would prefer it. LGBT rights not great in Ukraine, but better than they are, for example, in Russia and, you know, other places, which is not kind of a low bar, but it could be better for sure. And there are several countries in the European Union who don't have like great LGBT thing already. So Poland, for example, or Hungary, it's another story. But you know, just Orban is another story. But just I think it should not be like prohibit us from entering. But at the same time, despite how much I want you cool kids from European Union to accept Ukraine, at the same time I do believe you have to deserve it. So you have to be like work on yourself to be better. Then you can't expect people to be like, yeah, you're good when you're not. You know, it's you should be critical of your country, of things it does bad, of your people, things they do bad, and I think that's something we are not bad at in Ukraine. I mean, we are not like I don't want to be like those like fanatical nationalist types that are like, oh, my country is the best, like everyone shits butterflies and stuff like that. You know, I don't want that. I want to be critical because that turns you into Russia, basically, in some regard. I don't want to be like, Ura patriotism it's called in Russian. It's like, yay patriotism, you know? So like everything is good, nothing is bad. And how can you change your country and improve if you don't admit at least the bad things?
A lot of the Western propaganda, there's a lot of talk of all Ukrainians just nationalist on there, and even some allies of Ukraine, some people who have spoken out, even some live streamers I think you've talked to before have worried about this kind of growing nationalist influence on
I know who you mean.
Sure.
Wash. But that's.
I've not seen a whole lot of heavy nationalist thing. That's a very, very small group of people. It's part of the very old, I guess you can say, smear campaign against Ukraine. Is like that Russia has been doing since 50s, something like that, or 50 stuff. So pretty much the worst thing after World War II to be in Europe, in Eastern Europe, was a Nazi, right? Reasonably. So Stalin was no fool. He used that to pretty much call anyone he wanted to eliminate Nazis or Nazi collaborators, traitor nation, whatever, right? And then he would use it as an excuse to do anything with them. So kill them, deport them en masse, whatever. So he did this with Ukrainians. For example, Operation West was the mass deportation of Western Ukrainians to Siberia, and hundreds of thousands. And Tatari is the ethnicity of native people of Crimea, who Russia several times genocided, but the recent one was by Stalin, which was deportation of pretty much most of them to Siberia, Kazakhstan, whatever, and they then died on the road, quite a lot of them, and in labor camps as well. So so this is just something you could do. You could Tatari, actually 50% of them were in the Red Army. So then they returned supposedly as heroes after defeating Nazis and was shipped like items to, Siberia or some other place, great place in Russia. So it's just and the only reason why is that he called them collaborators and traitor nations, because, by the way, the only collaborators with Nazis from Tatari, they were actually shipped away by Nazis. So Nazis
props to Nazis, I guess. They did not live their own. They like took them, with them. So the only ones that were left were actually those who served in like Soviet and who were occupied, who were against Nazi occupation. And Soviets, deported, genocided them. So so this is just something that to keep in mind. It's an old story. They would use it constantly. They would call Ukrainian, all of them, like Bandera was turned into this like a nationalist figure in Ukrainian history during World War II. He was turned into this like poster boy for why all Ukrainians are Nazis, and still used like that. Not a day passes by that I'm not called like a Banderite or some stuff like that. So it's just So it's not true, because we don't have like a bigger problem with like Nazism, fascism, or like hardcore nationalism than pretty much anyone else. I would say even more, maybe even less than quite a lot of countries. There was like this very interesting survey done by, I think, Pew Research Center, that showed that Ukraine was the least anti-Semitic country in the whole area, pretty much. We have like the most amount of Jews, I think, who live, in Ukraine. And so we were like 4%. While the questionnaire was like, will you accept Jews as your neighbors? So that to that extent. And quite a lot of people said no. For example, in Armenia, 30-something% said no. I think 35 won't even live near to Jews. So pretty hardcore like anti-Semitism. But Russia did not want to denazify the PAL Armenia for some reason, right? So we were 4, I think, or something like that. So way lower. And so I'd say that to say there's obviously are nationalist ideas, which is not always bad. No, all nationalism does not equal a Nazi. And for some people apparently it is in the West. And so many people, of course, got much more I'd say radicalized because of the war. If you like invade and kill people, destroy their flags, burn their books, and made them literally wipe their asses with their history, which is something Russians did in Yahidne, which was a concentration camp. They made basically people there, they called them prisoners there for many days, and when they asked for like toilet paper, they gave them books of Ukrainian literature and history and language. So when things like that happen, you will get some pretty radical nationalist ideas for good reason, because if you want people to not care about their nation that much, maybe stop trying to destroy that nation every 50 years. Could work. The potential has a potential, but but overall I'd say like there are definitely like groups who are pretty radical, but they're very small, and the percentage of them is very small. And most importantly, we literally had no like political power. Those people like Azov, for example, like Bilin battalion for sure, right? But Azov, first of all, is nowhere near it was in the beginning. It was much more mellowed down, but most of all, they have like 0 seats like in Verkhovna Rada, which is like a parliament, and no like far right or even right, even like right-leaning parties got anywhere, no votes from people whatsoever. So it's fun to see people talk about it like that. When you have like people like Orban in Hungary, when you have Putin, when you have like, no offense to United States, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene in the pot, what the heck, it's just things like that. So we don't have even people like that in the actual government. So people who actually decide some shit, policies and stuff like that. So I would not like obviously like, call everyone fascist. This is something that leftists tend to do. But still you have like pretty right-leaning candidates, like Trump was a president and stuff like that, so it's kind of weird. In Italy, like literal election was won by a lady who thinks Mussolini was a cool dude. She's like, yeah, hero of Italy, so it's not a problem for them apparently. But Ukraine is like this infestation of like Nazis, and where are those like fucking Nazis? It's just a part of like pretty much Russian propaganda. And it's effective. It's effective. It's pretty effective. If I gotta give Russians like something they're good at, then propaganda would be it.
Like the one thing.
Drinking themselves to death as well.
Yes,
That's good as well. Raping and stealing and looting and destroying things. That's all things they're very good at. Mm-hmm. But propaganda definitely. Something is. That dude who was in charge of propaganda in Nazi Germany. We call him Goebbels, but I think you call him like Hubbles or something like that in English.
Goebbels.
Yeah, weirdest way of saying that, but whatever. So basically, he would be like crying tears right now of happiness if he saw that how effective Russian propaganda was, because even he, I think, was not as successful. Also, to keep in mind something, I guess, for the Western peeps is just imagine like Nazi Germany was Germany was Nazi for short time, and it done so much damage, right? But Russian propaganda and Russism, we call it like Russism, like Russian fascism, is something that have been for decades, for centuries, honestly, at this point. Like, so nearly a century, Soviet Union time, like after October Revolution. Not nearly a century, actually, more than a century, 2023 year, you know. So this is something to keep in mind, that it's not like that exactly. Obviously, it's not Soviet Union, but the main points, the main ideas of like Russian supremacy, of chauvinism, of disgust with like otherness, with Western degeneracy, if you will, with like other people, considering other people below you, like other nations below you, denying even their identity as a whole, so everyone is a fucking Russian to them. So it's just something that has been have not changed at all, pretty much. So no wonder it fucking bursted at some point. Yeah.
Even in Ukraine, obviously you hear Bandera and there's stuff about it. I mostly just hear it as a joke. A lot of people seem to like reclaimed his name as like, oh yeah, we're fucking Bandera.
Yeah, it's just you just have to like deal. Basically, if they call you that, regardless, you just roll with it basically. So people would make the robot like Bender. Mm-hmm. People will make that like a Bandera, Yeah, so I gifted my sister actually passport holder, like basically like a like a thing you put passport in, and it had like robot Bender, and it was like with Ukrainian embroidery and like ribbons in the hair, and it was called the passport of true Banderivka. Basically, there was like a robot there, so it's jokes like that. Yeah, people just kind of like embraced it since it has been 9 years at this point, So people embraced it and did not care that much, yeah. Because we know people who Bandera is a very controversial figure in Ukraine. Not quite a lot of people don't in fact praise them, maybe like half and half. But overall, even though who do see him as a hero, they see him as a hero because he fought for Ukrainian liberation and his organization, like Ukrainian Partisan Army. They actually fought, they did collaborate with Nazis at some point, but then they fought against both Soviet Union and Nazis, and actually Bandera spent most of the World War II in concentration camp, German concentration camp, because there was Soviet as well, but German concentration camp, and his brothers actually died, I believe, in the concentration camp, 2 of them. So of course it was a very hard time, very hard history, but have to understand that for those people, especially in Western Ukraine, Bolsheviki, Soviets, communism, they were the villains. They were the ones who annihilated their families, who tortured, tormented them, imprisoned them, deported them. So for them it was not Germans, but Bolsheviki, Soviet Union. But many people actually live in this delusion that they think it was this happy, go-lucky family, but it's just not true. And if you just look at some basic-ass history on Wikipedia, you would see it. But so sure, for them, collaborating with Nazis was a big, huge mistake, which they realized eventually, because they realized that not Hitler and pretty much Nazi, they do not care for Ukraine whatsoever, so they don't see us as people as well. We're like third on their list of scums that need to be annihilated, maybe enslaved if we're lucky, So this is like, they don't care obviously about Ukraine independence and stuff like that, so people realized it was a huge mistake, and there was like huge strife in that time, because they were like sandwiched between like 2 immense powers, like Red Army and Nazis. Mm-hmm. And I think it's whatever they did, like for example, like killing Jews, Poles, stuff like that, civilians as well, is all deeply wrong, obviously. But at the same time, you can easily understand what was good about them and what was bad about them. And I think it's important because history, especially in this type of period, is not black and white. It's very gray, and this was such a story. I would be concerned if people in Ukraine praised them for killing Jews. That would be kind of weird. Let's put it like that. That would be a cause for being like concerned. But I never honestly heard that once. I only heard that, oh, Bandera, yeah, he fought for our independence against Soviets and Nazis. And people like, it's took balls, let's put it like that, to do it, right? He also was killed by Bolsheviki, and his mother was, and I think, and sister were both were sent to camps, labor camps in Soviet Union. I think one of them died there, another one survived, but was there for 40 years or some shit like that. Well, it's just, yeah, it's pretty nasty story. So to understand, I kind of can empathize, I guess is the word, with him and his, army and his comrades as well, because I kind of know what they felt like. They felt like they were like fighting again for the survival of their country and for their people, which is what we do now. So more people now, I think, have a more favorable view even of them than before because of that, because they relate to the struggle. That's about it, I guess.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I was actually not going to... You saw my questions beforehand.
Oh.
I wasn't going to talk or mention a lot of this. It just kind of seemed natural.
Yeah, well.
Go down. So, unfortunately, I know you've talked about it
that's fine.
all the time. One last question about that, after I just apologized for having to bring it up on there. Do you think people... obviously, when you talked to Vosh, it seemed like a very simplified conversation on there. Do you think that people just see it as that black and white? That they don't look at the gray?
Some do, for sure, yeah. Especially, I don't think like actually Wash does, to be honest. But that's like I was very upset with his opinion about that. But I think overall his view is not black and white on Ukraine and on history as well. And I people like kind of think I like hate him now, which I don't. But I disagree, and I was upset by what he said, for sure, right? But at the same time, the rest of the work he done to talk about Ukraine, I appreciate. And so disagreement is not even a major one is not an excuse to just blame, to say person is like shit, I don't understand this thing, honestly, on the internet, but whatever, just so I think his view is not black and white, but quite a lot of his like viewers and also people like in the like leftoid, which he probably would agree with, like socialists who call themselves like socialist communists, they have like this very, supported a Nazi, boom, that's it, so this is a very, I guess, silly point. Silly because it's just not how history and not how reality works, and it's kind of fun as well to hear that from like the most privileged people like on earth who have never faced a struggle in their entire life, judging people who have been living in a country torn apart by red plague, as we call it, communism, right, and Nazis, and most of the victims were here on Ukraine, Nazi occupation as well, so it's just what the goal, to actually can think you can judge people like this with just no, and they also know very little. They just heard like, Bandera killed Jews and was supportive of Nazis. That's it. So that's it. They don't know like the struggle. They don't know even like about the Poles as well, which is Volynska Rezня is what happened. Is like Volyn massacre, which is not, again, he killed mostly civilians, which ain't good. But at the same time, nobody talks about the fact that Poles were occupiers at the time. So it's not just like, I killed them Poles, with no reason. So people just make it out to be about ethnicity, about like ethnocide, they just wanted to kill them Poles, But Poles were like in full control in Lviv back in the day, and they treated Ukrainians terribly. They would put them in camps, in concentration camps, torture chambers, whatever the fuck. So people were terrified. Like literally one of his best friends, I think was killed by Polish gendarmes and thrown to the streets for everyone to see. So it's not fucking easy, The people that they build resentment and hate for Poles and Jewish people as well, obviously, because they associated Jewish with the Soviet, with communism, which is a form of anti-Semitism, obviously, because you're like, Jews are Bolsheviki, they all are communists. But at the same time, many Jews did, in fact, were much more pro-communism, pro-Soviet, for good reason, because Nazis wanted to kill them, So this is very hard time. It's not like easy, and of course you shouldn't like say, good job, Not you should talk about it, about the awful stuff, obviously. But to say that, just to paint it like this with us, they're like supported Nazis at some point, must be like, devils and need to be killed. It's just not how I guess you should see things, in my opinion, which is pretty weird. Again, also many people just have zero knowledge about that, to be honest. They just are like, Nazis, that's it. you know.
Dunning-Kruger, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Also, they're like called Nazis. I kind of hate that. That's something that leftists in the West tend to do. They just call everyone a fucking Nazi. Like everyone is a Nazi. Like what is even a Nazi at this point? So it's just
someone doesn't put fries in your Cheeto bag, you know.
Yeah,
Nazis,
a fucking Nazi, man. You know, that's because I'm a Jew. You know, it's just
Right, yeah.
something like that. It's very weird. It's a very strange way of seeing things and diluting words as well, which I don't like because it's a strong word. You know, it's a strong word. It has a meaning. It has a very large, like very horrible history behind it. So call like a random, like I don't know, like a semi-conservative dude who just wants to keep his guns a Nazi is not a good idea. Yeah, but this is something that we talked about with, I guess, many people at this point.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to retread many of that. Like I said, I didn't plan to go down this tangent. It just kind of came up.
You know,
Yeah.
a conversation about Ukraine without Bandera,
Oh, what could it be?
impossible.
I would not be a journalist.
Yeah,
no.
not possible. Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say about Ukraine? Anything I missed? Anything you want to highlight? Anything that maybe nobody has asked you before that you want to talk about?
I've been asked a lot.
I know I give you a broad question,
Yeah,
but I typed
yeah.
this down. No.
You let me think what it might be. I guess the best thing to do would be to express gratitude towards people who supported us, because it meant a lot to people, obviously, not just because, you know, it literally helped us like defeat the enemy, but also the fact that people care. It does mean quite a bit to Ukraine because we have been quite invisible. I would remember like going to, like, you know, as a child to other countries, and I would try to explain like where I'm from, and I'd be like, oh, I'm from Ukraine, and they're like, what's that? Uganda? I was like, no, Ukraine. You know, so it's just like that. So they would be, oh, Russia. And be like, no, not Russia, for fuck's sake. You know, so people would be like, and I never blamed people because I understand that this was the result of like Russification, of Russian imperialism, and people don't own you pretty much anything. They don't own you to know the country that, you know, that is invisible, that not so much for people to know it. And so I do of course appreciate that people do care now about it, and I hope but most of all, I hope we care enough about it now. So we care enough about it to defend Ukraine, and to also to build a better future for people who would come, you know. So now we have to like live through this whole thing, I guess. And I want future generations to be to have better lives, to not suffer through what people suffered. And I want to kind of like to say that this, I hope my people, my generation, and people who are living right now, they will put a stop to this, I guess, loop in history that we're stuck in, which is like death and, you know, genocides and shit like that. So I do hope to end it, and I want Ukraine to be about different things than just gore and death and, you know, and war and corruption, and people know about, which is fair, you know, it's what's happening, but I want other things to be on people's tongues. I want when people think about Ukraine in the future, they don't think about wars, they don't think about post-Soviet shit, they think about, I don't know, like vareniki or something. Borscht maybe. Yeah, so something like that. So cultural things, music, maybe like food, I don't know, something like good things, like sports people, we have like plenty of good, like, you know, sport pips and things like that. So achievements that have nothing to do with, you know, war. So that would be probably be what I wanna. I do think people think of us right now. Many people think of us now as this like resilient and people who like are willing to, I guess, sacrifice quite a bit for like freedom and such like. But I just want people to chill finally, you know. Have a good life. I think we kind of deserved it at this point, you know. So so that's probably would be what I have to say. I guess that's about it. I think.
Anastasiya, thank you.
Yay! That's it. Good job, boss. actually kind of see it was this was like roses and like grapes and stuff like that here, all burned out.